Here on the channel Plow of Twist, we believe in equality, respect and dignity for all people, regardless of the color of their skin. Racism and discrimination have no place in our society. This story is a reminder of the power of resilience and justice, and we want you to know that we value and support you. Thank you for being here with us. Get ready for an exciting story, and if you haven't already subscribed, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and stay up to date with more impactful narratives like this. Let's do this together. Good story to you. A white woman humiliates a black resident of her building without knowing that he was the owner of his own building. The words came out of her mouth with calculated coldness, filled with a prejudice that could not be hidden. "What are you doing here? This place isn't for you," she said, her disdainful gaze crossing the building's lobby as she saw the black-skinned man standing there, holding his keys serenely. That elegant and well-kept environment, for her, did not suit someone like him. She believed he was an intruder, someone who had no right to be there. It must be a lost employee, a delivery man, or maybe just a freeloader, she thought, without even considering the possibility that she was wrong. But that man was no employee, nor was he lost. He lived there. More than that, he was the owner of the building, the owner of every wall, every hallway and every apartment in that place. However, she didn't know that. "I'm going to call security, because someone like you can't be here. If you don't leave now, you'll be thrown out in a way you'll never forget," she threatened, with an arrogance that came easily to her, as if she were doing her a favor. "Society." The man calmly let her speak, without rushing, without interruptions. He had learned, throughout his life, that sometimes silence is more powerful than any words. And in that moment, he chose silence, but not submission. He observed the woman's every gesture, every word full of prejudice that she uttered like poison, without knowing the impact it would have. And when she finished, when she thought she had put this man in his place, he finally replied, in a firm but surprisingly calm voice, "You can call security, but I think you should prepare for a surprise." That answer made time stop for a second. She didn't understand, she couldn't capture the meaning hidden in his words. How could I? For her, people like him had no power, no control. They were just uncomfortable presences to be removed. But the man knew something she didn't. He knew that, at that moment, he was just at the beginning of something bigger, something that would go far beyond that lobby. He had control of the situation, not because he wanted power or gratuitous revenge, but because he knew the strength of justice, of fair and impactful retribution. The woman walked away, still full of arrogance, certain that she had intimidated him. Little did she know that, soon, she would be forced to face a reality she never imagined. Everything I believed about who had value, who belonged, and who should be respected was about to crumble. And the man, who until then had remained silent, would begin to show his true position, revealing a truth that would leave her speechless. But what would he do after this humiliation? This is what will shock everyone. No one was prepared for what came next, not even him. The decisions he would make from that moment on would not only surprise the woman, but would also redefine the meaning of justice, respect and power. She wouldn't be the only one to learn a lesson. Every person in that building, every tenant, every neighbor, they would all see this story unfold in a way they would never forget. After all, when someone is unfairly humiliated, true power is not in reacting in kind, but in transforming the situation in intelligent and unexpected ways. And that's exactly what happened. That woman, who once thought she was superior, would have to face the results of her words and actions. But how? How could a man who seemed so calm and peaceful turn the tables in such an impactful way? What he did was so unexpected, so outside the norm, that it left everyone unresponsive. The most surprising? It wasn't just a matter of revenge. It was a lesson, a calculated move that would show everyone that underestimating someone based on prejudice is not only wrong, but can have consequences no one expects. And this woman, so confident of her superiority, would discover the hard way that a person's power and value are not measured by the color of their skin, but by the attitudes and truth they carry with them. What he did after that humiliation would change everything. And this story, which begins with contempt and prejudice, ends in a way you would never imagine. Are you ready to find out what happened? Be ready, because what comes next will surprise you. The day dawned like any other, but tension was in the air. The atmosphere of the historic New Orleans building, always serene, was about to be shaken in a way no one could have predicted. For many of the residents, it was just another morning. Routines continued as usual, coffee being served in the apartments, trivial conversations in the elevator, the comings and goings of busy people. But, for Marlon, this was the beginning of something bigger. The humiliation he had faced would not leave his mind. It wasn't just about the words loaded with racism, but the look of contempt, the feeling of being judged by the color of your skin and not by the value you carried as a person. Marlon was not a man of direct confrontations. He had always believed that actions spoke louder than words, and that day, he was determined to prove it. After the tense encounter with the woman, he continued his routine as if nothing had happened. He walked through the corridors of the building, greeted other residents, and went to his office, located on the top floor. Few knew that there, in that large room overlooking the Mississippi River, was where Marlon ran his business, where he made decisions that affected not only the lives of the building's residents, but many others around the city. As he reviewed documents and emails, the memory of that woman's arrogance never left his mind. It wasn't the first time he'd faced racism, but this time, something inside him sparked a desire to do something different, something that went beyond simply ignoring the offense. He knew he had the power to change things, to show that prejudice would not go unnoticed, not anymore. He had control, but the key was to use it intelligently, without losing his composure, without sinking to the level of those who underestimated him. Hours later, Marlon decided to go down to the lobby again. The woman was there, talking to another resident, as if nothing had happened. When he saw him approaching, the look of contempt returned to his face, but this time, he noticed something different. There was a slight discomfort in her eyes, a realization that perhaps she had made a mistake, but the pride was too great for her to admit it. She turned to him and, with a fake smile, asked, "Have you decided to leave the building or do you still insist on being here?" He just watched her for a moment, before calmly responding, "Don't worry, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." The other resident, without understanding the context, looked from one to the other, confused. There was something unsaid, something that was clear to Marlon, but completely hidden from them. With a discreet wave, he said goodbye and headed to the elevator, leaving behind the woman who, for a brief moment, seemed disconcerted. As the elevator went up, Marlon mentally reviewed the plan he had started to draw up. He wasn't in a hurry. I knew that real change required time and patience, but the impact would be greater than any impulsive response. His intention was not just to respond to that woman, but to show everyone that the power to define who belongs to a place was not in the hands of those who judge, but in the actions and character of those who are judged. Days passed, and tensions in the building began to grow subtly. Small adjustments were made, changes to the routine that went unnoticed by most, but that directly affected those who thought they were untouchable. Marlon began to implement new rules of coexistence, reinforcing the importance of respect and equality among residents. He made a point of holding a condominium meeting, calling everyone to discuss these new guidelines. The woman, still unaware of Marlon's true position, appeared with the same arrogance as always, ready to criticize any change she considered unnecessary. During the meeting, Marlon's words were precise, firm, but never aggressive. He highlighted the need for all residents to be treated equally, to respect each other, regardless of their origins or appearance. This building, he said at one point, is more than just a place to live. It's a community. And as a community, we must make sure everyone feels welcome and respected. The woman couldn't hold her tongue. And who are you to decide that? Why does someone like you have such a voice here? Marlon looked directly at her, without looking away. The silence that followed was deafening, but he remained calm. Who am I? He asked, almost rhetorically, before continuing. I'm someone who believes that respect and dignity are fundamental. And that's not something that depends on color, status, or position. Marlon's words echoed in the minds of those present, but especially in the woman's. She felt something different at that moment, a feeling that something was out of place, but she still couldn't understand what it was. She wanted to retort, but something stopped her. Maybe it was Marlon's calm, collected tone, or maybe it was the dawning realization that there was more to the story than she knew. As the meeting ended, Marlon knew the moment of revelation was near. He was laying the groundwork, carefully orchestrating every move. But it was not yet time to act. There was more to be done, more pieces to be put into place before he could completely turn the game around. And so, the building continued its routine, the residents went on with their lives, but the discomfort among some grew. Everyone was about to witness something that would forever change the dynamics of that place, but they still didn't know what was coming. Only one thing was certain: when the truth finally came out, no one would remain indifferent. The feeling that something big was about to happen was spreading, like a cloud before a storm. And Marlon, with his unshakable calm, was at the center of it all, waiting for the right moment to act. When that moment came, he knew nothing would be the same. The atmosphere in the building became palpable in the weeks following the condominium meeting. There was something different in the air, a subtle but undeniable tension. Residents began to notice changes in the environment, small details that previously went unnoticed, but now caused discomfort. The woman, who had humiliated Marlon without knowing his true identity, felt this even more intensely. Something was out of place, and she couldn't understand what it was. Marlon's serene face appeared in her mind constantly, his voice echoing in her memories, so calm, so controlled. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, but she didn't know what. Marlon, in turn, continued his daily activities as calmly as ever. His presence in the building was discreet but felt. He knew the moment was approaching. The pieces were moving according to plan, and all that was left was the final blow, the revelation that would change the dynamics of the building and leave a lesson that would never be forgotten. He was in no rush, he knew that patience was a powerful ally. And patience, added to intelligence and strategy, would bring a much more significant victory than any impulsive response. That morning, Marlon received a notification from his lawyer. The last details had been worked out, and everything was prepared. He knew it was time to act. Not with revenge, but with justice, in the most impactful and definitive way possible. What he was about to do would not only put the woman in her place, but it would also send a clear message to everyone in that building about the true meaning of respect and dignity. The woman, oblivious to what was coming, was in the middle of a conversation with other residents in the lobby. They were discussing trivialities, commenting on the lives of their neighbors, when they were interrupted by a notification that echoed through their cell phones at the same time. It was an email sent to everyone in the building, calling them to an emergency meeting that night. The message, signed by Marlon, did not give many details, but made it clear that everyone's presence was mandatory. The woman frowned as she read the message. What does he want now? She muttered to herself, clearly uncomfortable. First, that speech about respect, and now this? Who does he think he is to make so many demands? The other women exchanged looks, also curious, but none of them knew the answer. The only certainty was that something important would be discussed, something that, in one way or another, would change the building's routine. That night, the building's lobby was full. All residents had responded to the call. The atmosphere was full of expectation, and the silence was almost absolute when Marlon entered the room. He was dressed simply, but his posture was confident. He looked at each person present before starting to speak. I thank everyone for coming, he began, his calm voice filling the space. I invited you here today because there is something important that everyone needs to know. Something that will affect all of us, but especially our community. The woman's eyes narrowed as she watched him. Something about his posture seemed different to her, something she couldn't identify. Marlon continued, this building, as many of you know, has a long history in New Orleans. It has been the scene of several stories, good and bad, but it has always been a symbol of the community we have here. However, recently, issues have arisen that go beyond the walls of this building. Issues that involve how we treat each other and the respect we owe each other. He paused, allowing his words to resonate. Over the past few weeks, I have made some decisions that I believe are necessary to ensure that this building continues to be a place where everyone feels welcome and respected. And that is why I am here today, to share with you the truth that many are unaware of. He turned directly to the woman, who was now visibly uncomfortable but still didn't understand what was coming. Many of you don't know, but I own this building, Marlon declared, his voice firm but without arrogance. A murmur of surprise ran through the room, but he didn't wait for it to dissipate before continuing. Throughout this time, I remained silent, observing and reflecting on how I could handle certain situations in a fair and impactful way. But what I cannot tolerate, what I will never tolerate, is disrespect, especially when it is based on racial prejudice. Shock began to appear on the woman's face. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. The truth hit her like a blow, leaving her speechless. Marlon continued, now with his eyes fixed on her, you, more than anyone, should know that respect is not asked for, it is earned. But when it is so blatantly and unfairly denied, justice must be served. He paused, allowing his words to sink in. A while ago, I decided that I would not respond to your humiliation with hatred or revenge, but with the truth. And the truth is that you no longer have a place here. From today onwards, your rental contract will not be renewed, and you will have 30 days to vacate the property. The revelation fell like a bomb in the room, leaving everyone in shock. The woman tried to speak, but her voice broke. The other residents were stunned, unable to process what they had just heard. This is not just my decision, Marlon continued. It's a message. A message that respect is a two-way street. When it is broken so badly, the consequences are inevitable. And its consequences, unfortunately, will lead her to look for a new place to live. The room remained in sepulchral silence for a few seconds, before the woman finally regained her speech. You can't do that, she shouted, her voice thick with disbelief. I have rights, and I will fight for them. You are being unfair, this is an abuse of power. Marlon remained calm, unfazed by the attack. Unfair, he repeated, his voice filled with unshakable serenity. What's really unfair is judging someone by the tone of their skin, by what you think they deserve or don't deserve. But you're right about one thing, everyone has rights, and your right is to look for a new home where you can reflect on your actions. I will not argue with you about this, because my decision has already been made, and it is irrevocable. She tried to argue back, but the words stuck in her throat. The other residents looked from one to the other, still shocked, but many understood Marlon's point. The truth, harsh as it was that he was acting with cold but necessary justice. It wasn't about revenge, but about drawing a clear line between what was acceptable and what wasn't. For years, I kept my position as owner of this building a secret, Marlon continued. I did it because I believed everyone should be treated equally, regardless of who was in charge. But unfortunately, situations like this show that sometimes it is necessary to remind everyone who really has the responsibility to ensure that equality. The woman couldn't process what was happening. It was as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. She, who had always considered herself so above others, now found herself exposed, humiliated, in front of everyone she knew. This is a joke, she stammered, more to herself than anyone else. But there was no laughter in the room. The atmosphere was serious, heavy, full of a lesson that would not be forgotten any time soon. Marlon took a deep breath before speaking again. You have 30 days to leave. If you need help with the move, I will be on hand to offer the necessary support. I want you to understand that this is not a decision I made with pleasure, but rather with the weight of responsibility I have as an owner and as a human being. Respect is not negotiable, and when it is broken, the consequences must be proportionate. She finally gave in to silence, defeated. There was nothing more to say. Marlon, in turn, remained firm, but without showing any satisfaction with what he had just done. He knew that it was necessary, but he also knew that it was just the beginning of a new phase for the building, a phase where respect and equality would no longer be optional, but mandatory. As the residents dispersed, still trying to absorb everything that happened, Marlon remained in the lobby, watching everyone leave. He knew that from now on, things would be different. Not because he wanted to be seen as someone powerful, but because he wanted everyone to know that respect is not something that can be given or taken away based on prejudice, but rather a fundamental right of everyone who lived there. And so, with the decision made and the course of action defined, he prepared for the next chapter of this story. I knew there was still a lot to be done, but I also knew that, finally, the message had been clear. The true power was not in his hands, but in the truth and justice he represented. After the meeting, silence settled deep inside the building. Each resident, upon returning to their apartment, reflected on what they had witnessed. Marlon's revelation echoed in their minds, and everyone understood that there was no return. The truth had been inescapably exposed, and the consequences of the initial humiliation were finally coming to light. However, the story was still far from over. There was a moral dilemma hanging over everyone, and Marlon knew that it wasn't enough to just expel the woman, there was something bigger at stake. In the following days, news of Marlon's decision spread like wildfire. Some residents agreed with him, understanding the need for such an attitude. Others, however, questioned whether expulsion was really the best solution, whether it would not perpetuate the cycle of prejudice and resentment. Marlon felt the weight of these opinions, and no matter how firm he was in his decision, he knew there was a fine line between justice and revenge. He spent most of his time in his office, thinking about the implications of what he had done. He knew he had acted in accordance with his principles, but what kept him up at night was the question that hung in the air: had he somehow become what he despised? Was he, with his decision, perpetuating the same exclusion that he so condemned? These questions began to eat away at his convictions, and Marlon realized that the hardest battle was within himself. One afternoon, while looking out the window at the vibrant city of New Orleans, he was surprised by a knock on the door. When he opened it, he found one of the residents, an elderly woman who had lived in the building longer than anyone else. She entered, with slow but firm steps, and sat down in front of Marlon, who received her with respect. "You did what you thought was right," the lady began, her voice soft but full of wisdom. "But what's right isn't always simple." Marlon nodded, without saying anything. He knew that conversation would bring his internal dilemmas to the surface. The lady continued, "I have been here for a long time. I saw many things, people who come and go, stories that repeat themselves in different ways. What you did was a fair response to what happened, but justice, as necessary as it is, can leave scars. The question is, Marlon, what kind of scars do you want to leave?" He looked at her, pondering each word. There was truth in what she said. Expelling the woman had been a fair action, but justice can be harsh, especially when applied in an inflexible manner. Marlon was beginning to realize that it might take more than a simple expulsion to resolve the issue. Perhaps something deeper was needed, something that would not only right the wrong but also offer a chance at redemption. "I wonder, Marlon," said the lady, "if there is a way to teach a lesson without creating more divisions. If there is a way to make her and all of us grow from this. Maybe, instead of just sending her away, you could show her the real impact of her actions, make her understand the harm she caused. This may be more difficult, but it could be the path to real change." The lady's words resonated deeply within Marlon. He had acted with the certainty that he was doing the right thing, but now he saw that true justice required more than a simple action. It required understanding, empathy, and the ability to transform not only the environment, but also people. And that meant facing the moral dilemma of offering a second chance, even when the first had been rejected with such contempt. When saying goodbye to the lady, Marlon was left alone with his thoughts. The easiest path would be to stick to his original decision, but he knew that true change doesn't come from ease, but from challenge. Perhaps it was time to reconsider, to find a way to make women understand that respect is not imposed with force, but is built with dialogue and understanding. However, that meant reaching out to someone who had treated him with such disdain. Would he be willing to take that step? Would the woman be willing to accept it? The dilemma was complex, and Marlon knew that any decision he made would have profound consequences. But one thing was certain, he would not allow the cycle of hate to continue. I needed to find a balance between justice and humanity, between what was right and what was necessary for real change. And to do that, he would have to do something he might never have imagined. Now, the question was not just what he would do next, but whether the woman was willing to learn from her mistakes and whether the other residents would be able to see the importance of justice that not only punishes, but also transforms. The answers were about to be revealed, and the end of this story still held surprises that no one expected. After days of deep reflection, Marlon decided to act. He called a new meeting, but this time, only the woman was called. The meeting was scheduled in the building's lobby, the same place where it all started. When she arrived, the room was empty, except for Marlon, who was calmly waiting for her. She walked in nervously, expecting a continuation of the previous confrontation, but there was something different about Marlon. He seemed calmer, but at the same time, determined. Before she could say anything, he began to speak. I thought a lot about everything that happened, about the humiliation you put me through and about my decision to expel you. I could get on with it, stand my ground, and maybe you'd learn something. But there is another way we can deal with this. She frowned, unsure of what he was proposing. Marlon continued, I gave you 30 days to leave, but I'm reconsidering that decision. What I want now is to offer you a chance to reflect and, perhaps, learn from what happened here. If you are willing, we can talk, understand what led to all of this, and see if there is a way to rebuild, instead of simply destroying. The woman was silent, surprised. I didn't expect this approach. I felt ashamed for what I had done, but I also didn't know how to deal with what was being offered. She had a chance to redeem herself, but that meant confronting her own flaws and prejudices. After a moment, she finally spoke, I never thought you would give me a second chance. I know I made a mistake, I know I misjudged you. Maybe I don't deserve it, but I'm willing to try. Marlon watched her for a moment, assessing her sincerity. If you're really sincere, we can work on it. It won't be easy, nor fast. Respect is something that is built, and you will have to show, not to me, but to everyone, that you are capable of being better than what you have shown so far. She nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility. He knew this was his last opportunity to correct his mistakes. Marlon wasn't asking for perfection, but rather genuine effort. And for the first time, she understood that the problem wasn't just about how she treated others, but also about how she saw herself. Accepting that offer of redemption meant accepting that there was a lot to learn and change in his life. The following days were of transformation. Marlon kept his promise to support the woman in the process, but without ever alleviating the responsibility she had for her own actions. He involved her in the building's community activities, events that brought together residents from different cultures and backgrounds, creating an environment of true inclusion. She, in turn, began to get involved, listening to stories, sharing experiences, and slowly understanding the impact of her words and actions. Over time, the building changed. What was once a simple housing structure has become a true community. And Marlon, through his calm and steady leadership, showed that power lies not just in ownership or control, but in the ability to guide others to a place of greater understanding and respect. In the end, the woman was not expelled. She chose to stay and, more importantly, she chose to change. His transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it was real. She learned, through interaction and the lessons that Marlon and other residents gave her, that respect is a two-way street, and that prejudice has no place in a fair society. As for Marlon, he became more than just the owner of the building. He became a living example of how to face hatred with dignity, of how to transform a situation of injustice into an opportunity for growth for everyone involved. His decision to give a second chance not just to the woman, but to everyone there, reinforced the idea that true change comes from within, from a genuine desire to be better. And so, the building, once a symbol of tension and inequality, became a place where everyone could coexist with respect and dignity. The lesson Marlon taught was not just for the woman who humiliated him, but for everyone who witnessed the story. The power of justice lies in its ability to heal, not to hurt. This story shows us the impact of the choices we make in the face of adversity. Marlon could have chosen the path of revenge, but he opted for justice and the opportunity for redemption, showing that true power lies in transforming what is bad into something better. And you, how do you deal with situations of prejudice or injustice that you face? How can we, together, build a more just and respectful world? If this story touched you in any way, share your opinion in the comments. We want to hear what you think about the power of forgiveness, justice, and change. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel Tales of Twist. Here, we always bring stories that make us reflect on life and our choices. Leave your like and activate the bell so you don't miss any news. Until the next story.